In a galaxy where humans are considered the weakest species, where our military prowess is mocked by alien empires that span star systems, one simple rule governs survival: follow orders, protect your unit, complete the mission. But what happens when following that basic human instinct, the refusal to abandon those under your care, accidentally rewrites the laws of interstellar warfare? Sometimes the most ordinary person doing the most ordinary thing can shatter the extraordinary assumptions of an entire universe. This is the story of Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, who never wanted to be a hero, never sought glory, and certainly never intended to prove that humanity's greatest weakness might actually be their most terrifying strength. When the Calathan Empire's most elite forces encountered a single human soldier who simply wouldn't stop doing his job, they discovered that some species don't fight to win, they fight because they don't know how to quit. The transport ship Meridian's hope shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its hull groaning under the stress of the emergency translation. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen gripped his harness tighter, feeling the familiar knot in his stomach that came with every combat drop. Around him, 23 other members of the human Colonial Defense Force sat in similar restraints, their faces showing the same mix of determination and barely controlled fear that he'd seen countless times before. "Listen up, people," Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system. "Intel says we've got a Calathan strike force that's taken the mining colony on Kepler 442c. 300 civilian miners, mostly families. The aliens are using them as leverage to force the Terran Council to surrender the entire system." Marcus checked his rifle for the 100th time, running through the familiar ritual that kept his hands steady and his mind focused. The weapon was nothing special by galactic standards, projectile-based, primitive according to the energy weapon-wielding Calathan Empire. But it was reliable, and Marcus had learned long ago that reliability mattered more than raw power when lives were on the line. "Calathan forces are estimated at 2 full battle groups," Rodriguez continued, his voice tight with the kind of tension that came with impossible odds. "That's roughly 400 elite shock troopers with full energy shielding, plasma weaponry, and air support. Our job is to get in, secure the civilians, and hold until the main fleet arrives." Private Williams, barely 18 and, on his second deployment, raised his hand. "Sir, what's our extraction timeline?" The pause before Rodriguez answered told Marcus everything he needed to know. "Extraction window opens in 72 hours. If we're not at the pickup point with the civilians by then, the fleet moves on to prevent the Calathan from claiming the system's resources." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. 72 hours to infiltrate a fortified position, rescue 300 civilians, and somehow survive against odds of nearly 17 to 1. It was, by any reasonable standard, a suicide mission. The kind of assignment that happened when the politicians needed to show they were doing something, even if that something was sending good soldiers to die. But that was the job. Marcus had signed up knowing that sometimes the job meant doing the impossible, and if you couldn't do the impossible, you at least tried to do what was right. The Meridian's hope shook again as defensive fire from the planet's surface began tracking their descent. Through the small porthole, Marcus could see the orange glow of energy weapons cutting through the atmosphere, searching for their ship. The pilot was good at dodging and weaving through the deadly light show with the kind of skill that kept transports in one piece and soldiers alive long enough to reach the ground. 30 seconds to drop, Rodriguez announced. "Remember, we go in fast and quiet. Primary objective is civilian extraction. Secondary objective is intelligence gathering on Calathan occupation protocols. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary, we need to preserve our strength for the long haul." Marcus stood with the rest of his squad, checking his equipment one final time. Ammunition, medical supplies, emergency rations, portable communication array, everything he'd need to keep his people alive and functional for the next 3 days. It wasn't much, but it was what they had. The drop bay doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the cloudy atmosphere of Kepler 442c rushing past below. The mining colony sprawled across a plateau surrounded by jagged mountain peaks, its industrial structures dark except for the harsh white lights of Calathan occupation forces. Even from this altitude, Marcus could see the geometric precision of alien defensive positions, their energy barriers glowing like deadly stars in the darkness. "Go, go, go." Marcus threw himself into the void, feeling the familiar sensation of gravity taking hold as his combat suit's thrusters engaged automatically. Around him, 23 other soldiers fell through the night sky like human meteors, their descent controlled by technology that was centuries behind what the Calathan possessed but had been refined through generations of human ingenuity and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The ground rushed up to meet them, and Marcus hit the rocky terrain with practiced ease, his suit's impact systems absorbing most of the shock. He rolled to his feet, weapon ready, scanning the immediate area for threats. The squad had scattered across a 2-kilometer area as planned, each soldier landing in a predetermined position that would allow them to regroup quickly while minimizing the chance of being detected by enemy sensors. Marcus activated his communication array, switching to the encrypted tactical frequency that would keep their transmissions hidden from Calathan monitoring systems. "Sound off," he whispered into his helmet microphone. "Wolf Pack, report status." One by one, his squad members checked in. 23 voices confirming successful landing, no injuries, weapons and equipment functional. It was a small miracle in itself. Orbital insertion was dangerous under the best of circumstances, and these were far from the best of circumstances. "All right, people," Marcus said, consulting the tactical display on his suit's heads-up system. "We move to Checkpoint Alpha in 30 minutes. Stay low, stay quiet, and remember, we're here to save lives, not take them. But if the Calathan force our hand, we make them regret it." The squad began moving through the broken terrain that surrounded the mining colony, using natural cover and the planet's minimal moonlight to mask their approach. Marcus took point, his enhanced vision systems scanning for enemy patrols while his ears strained for any sound that might indicate Calathan presence. Kepler 442c was a harsh world, its atmosphere barely breathable and its surface scarred by decades of intensive mining operations. The colonists who had chosen to make their lives here were tough, resourceful people who had carved out an existence on a planet that seemed determined to kill them. They deserved better than to be used as pawns in an interstellar conflict they had no part in starting. As the squad moved closer to the colony's outer perimeter, Marcus began to see signs of the Calathan occupation. Energy fences hummed with lethal power, creating barriers that would instantly kill any human who tried to cross them. Guard towers rose at regular intervals, their sensors sweeping the surrounding area with methodical precision. Patrol craft moved through the air in carefully coordinated patterns, their searchlights casting shifting circles of illumination across the ground. It was a textbook occupation, efficient, overwhelming, designed to crush any hope of resistance before it could begin. The Calathan were masters of psychological warfare, using their superior technology to create a sense of hopelessness in their enemies. Most species surrendered rather than face the devastating consequences of opposing the Empire. But humans, Marcus reflected as he studied the alien defenses, had never been particularly good at recognizing when they should surrender. "Checkpoint Alpha, 200 meters, came Private Johnson's voice through the comm system. "I can see the main detention facility from here. Looks like they've got the civilians packed into the mining complex's central processing center." Marcus crawled to the edge of a rocky outcropping and extended his rifle's scope, studying the target through its advanced optics. The processing center was a massive structure designed to handle the colonies or extraction operations, its heavy construction making it an ideal prison. Calathan guards patrolled the exterior in groups of 4, their energy weapons glowing with barely contained power. "Count the guards," Marcus ordered. "I need numbers, patrol patterns, weapon types. Everything you can give me." For the next 20 minutes, his squad systematically cataloged the enemy's defensive arrangements. It was methodical work, the kind of detailed observation that could mean the difference between a successful rescue and a massacre. The Calathan were professional soldiers, Marcus had to admit. Their positions were well chosen, their patrol schedules irregular enough to prevent prediction, and their equipment was clearly superior to anything the humans possessed. But they were also arrogant. Marcus could see it in the casual way they moved, the lack of urgency in their preparations. They viewed humans as little more than an inconvenience, a minor species that could be brushed aside whenever convenient. It was the kind of overconfidence that could be exploited by soldiers who knew how to think creatively. "Sergeant," Williams whispered through the comm, "I'm reading energy signatures from inside the processing center. Looks like the Calathan have set up some kind of broadcast array." Marcus frowned, adjusting his own sensors to confirm the reading. The energy pattern was wrong for standard communication equipment, too powerful, too focused.
Rodriguez, you getting this?
Confirmed, came the captain's voice.
That's not a communication array.
It's a neural disruptor field. They're using it to keep the civilians docile and compliant. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. A neural disruptor didn't just prevent escape attempts, it gradually broke down a person's ability to think independently, turning them into cooperative shells of their former selves. If the field had been running for more than a few hours, some of the psychological damage might already be permanent.
New priority, Marcus said, his voice hard with controlled anger.
We need to take down that disruptor field first.
Everything else is secondary. It was no longer just a rescue mission.
It was a race against time to save not just the colonists' lives, but their minds as well. And Marcus knew that his squad, outnumbered and outgunned as they were, represented the only hope those 300 people had. He studied the alien defenses one more time, calculating angles of attack and probable casualty rates. The numbers weren't encouraging, but numbers had never told the whole story when it came to human soldiers doing their jobs.
All right, Wolfpack, Marcus said into his microphone. Here's how we're going to do this.
The attack began at 0347 local time, when Corporal Martinez detonated his improvised explosive device against the colony's main power coupling. The blast sent a cascade of sparks into the night sky and plunged half the facility into darkness, disrupting sensor networks and forcing the Calathan guards to rely on their individual equipment rather than the integrated defense system they preferred. Marcus counted to 3, then opened fire. His rifle spat projectiles at hypersonic velocity, each round carefully aimed at the weak points in Calathan energy armor that his squad had identified during their reconnaissance. The aliens' shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the kinetic impacts, but Marcus had expected that.
Human weapons couldn't penetrate Calathan defenses through brute force, they had to be smarter.
The first guard fell when Private Williams's shot hit the power coupling for his shield generator, causing the protective field to collapse just as Marcus's follow-up round found its target. The second guard managed to return fire, his plasma weapon sending a bolt of superheated energy that turned a section of rocky ground into glass, but Johnson was already moving to flank him from behind. Neural disruptor is still active, Rodriguez reported through the comms. We need to reach that processing center fast. The longer that field runs, the more damage it does to the civilians. Marcus low-crawled across 15 meters of open ground, using the alien guards' confusion to close the distance to the facility's outer perimeter. The energy fence buzzed with lethal current, but his squad had prepared for that obstacle. Williams tossed a metallic sphere that unfolded into a complex device designed to overload power systems through electromagnetic induction, technology that was crude by galactic standards but effective enough for their purposes. The fence sputtered and died, leaving a gap wide enough for the squad to slip through. Marcus went first, his weapon trained on the shadows where more Calathan soldiers might be waiting. Behind him, 23 other humans moved with the fluid precision that came from months of training together, each person knowing their role and executing it without hesitation.
The processing center loomed ahead, its bulk darker than the surrounding night.
Marcus could see the glow of the neural disruptor array through the building's windows, casting an eerie purple light that made his skin crawl. Somewhere inside that structure, 300 civilians were slowly having their minds stripped away, turned into empty vessels that would offer no resistance to whatever the Calathan Empire had planned for them.
2 squads, north and south entrances, Marcus ordered. 3rd squad, find me a way to the roof. I want multiple entry points in case this goes sideways.
It was standard human tactics, redundancy, flexibility, the ability to adapt when the original plan fell apart. The Calathan preferred overwhelming force applied to a single point, using their superior technology to smash through whatever resistance they encountered. It was an approach that worked well against most opponents, but humans had learned to fight differently out of necessity. The north entrance was guarded by 6 Calathan soldiers arranged in a defensive formation that provided overlapping fields of fire. Marcus studied their positions for 30 seconds, then activated his helmet's tactical overlay to share what he'd observed with his squad leaders.
Johnson, can you reach that ventilation shaft 20 meters to the right?
Affirmative, Sergeant.
Williams, there's a service ladder on the building's west side. Get me eyes on the roof situation. Copy that. Martinez, you and I are going to walk through the front door. Everyone else provides covering fire on my signal. It was a simple plan, relying on speed and aggression rather than complex coordination. Marcus had learned long ago that elaborate strategies tended to fall apart as soon as the shooting started, and the best approach was usually to hit the enemy hard and fast before they could organize an effective response. The signal came as a double click on the tactical frequency. Johnson disappeared into the ventilation system like a ghost, while Williams scaled the service ladder with spider-like agility. Martinez positioned himself behind a pile of mining equipment, his heavy weapon trained on the guard's position. Marcus stood up and walked toward the north entrance at a steady pace, his rifle held ready but not aimed directly at the Calathan soldiers. It was a calculated risk, appearing non-threatening enough to buy a few crucial seconds while still being prepared to fight if necessary. The guards noticed him when he was 30 meters away. Their energy weapons swiveled toward him with mechanical precision, targeting systems locking onto what they perceived as a significant threat. Marcus could see the blue glow of charging plasma conduits, the telltale sign that the aliens were preparing to fire. He dove to the left as 6 energy bolts seared the air where he'd been standing, rolling behind a concrete barrier as the Calathan opened up with everything they had. The barrier began to smoke and crack under the sustained fire, its molecular structure breaking down under the intense heat of plasma weapons. But the aliens had made a mistake. By focusing their attention on Marcus, they'd forgotten about the other 22 humans who were now in position around the facility. Williams opened fire from the roof, his shots forcing 2 guards to take cover. Johnson emerged from the ventilation shaft behind them, his surprise attack eliminating a 3rd guard before the others could react. Martinez's heavy weapon spoke with authority, its large-caliber rounds punching through alien armor with devastating effect. The remaining guards found themselves caught in a crossfire, their superior technology unable to compensate for being outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The firefight lasted exactly 47 seconds. When the smoke cleared, 6 Calathan soldiers lay dead, and the north entrance to the processing center stood unguarded. Marcus picked himself up from behind the barrier, noting the scorch marks on his combat suit where plasma bolts had come uncomfortably close to finding their target. "Status report," he called over the calm, "north entrance secure," came Johnson's voice. "No casualties on our side." "South entrance clear," reported Corporal Davis. "Found another 6 guards, but they were focused on the noise from your firefight. Made it easy to flank them." "Roof access confirmed," Williams added. "I can see the neural disruptor array from here. Big sucker, probably takes a lot of power to run." Marcus moved toward the facility's entrance, stepping over the bodies of the fallen Calathan soldiers. Up close, the aliens were impressive specimens, tall, powerfully built, their natural armor plating augmented by sophisticated technology that should have made them nearly invulnerable to human weapons. The fact that his squad had taken them down so efficiently was testament to superior tactics and the kind of teamwork that came from soldiers who trusted each other completely. The interior of the processing center was a maze of industrial equipment and conveyor systems, all of it now silent and dark. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the walls, and Marcus could hear the low hum of the neural disruptor field somewhere deeper in the building. His skin tingled unpleasantly. Even at this distance, the alien device was having a subtle effect on human nervous systems. 2 teams, Marcus ordered. Alpha team finds and neutralizes the disruptor. Bravo team locates the civilians and prepares them for extraction. We have maybe 10 minutes before Calathan reinforcements arrive. The squad split up according to plan, with Marcus leading Alpha team deeper into the facility while Rodriguez took Bravo team toward what their reconnaissance had identified as the main detention area. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in the oppressive silence, could feel the weight of responsibility that came with knowing that hundreds of lives depended on his ability to do his job correctly. The neural disruptor was located in what had once been the facility's main control room, its alien components grafted onto human systems with the kind of brutal efficiency that characterized Calathan engineering. The device itself was beautiful in an unsettling way, crystalline structures that pulsed with purple light, connected by flowing cables that seemed to move with a life of their own. "Williams, I need you to find the power coupling for this thing," Marcus said, studying the alien technology with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. Johnson watched the door.
Martinez, help me figure out what happens if we just blow this thing up.
Destroying the neural disruptor would be easy enough. A few well-placed explosive charges would turn the delicate alien machinery into expensive scrap metal.
But Marcus was concerned about feedback effects that might harm the civilians who had been exposed to the field. Some neural disruptor designs included failsafes that delivered a final, devastating pulse when the device was damaged.
Power coupling located, Williams reported.
Looks like standard Calathon energy distribution. If we cut the main feed, the whole array should shut down safely.
Do it.
Williams worked with practiced efficiency, using a combination of human tools and improvised techniques to bypass alien security protocols. The neural disruptor's glow began to fade as its power supply was severed, the crystalline structures dimming until they were nothing more than inert mineral formations. Almost immediately, Marcus felt the oppressive weight lifting from his mind. The subtle pressure that had been building since he entered the facility was gone, replaced by the clear thinking that he associated with being fully human. "Bravo team, report," he said into his calm. "We've got the civilians," Rodriguez replied, his voice tight with strain.
312 people, mostly families.
They're confused and scared, but they're mobile. Some of them don't remember how they got here. The neural field did some damage. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, feeling a familiar surge of anger at the casual cruelty of the Calathon Empire. Using a neural disruptor on civilians wasn't just a military tactic, it was a form of torture, designed to break the human spirit and make resistance impossible.
The fact that some of the colonists might never fully recover from the experience made what the aliens had done even more unforgivable. "Extraction point is 2 kilometers northeast," Marcus said, consulting his tactical display. "We move in groups of 50, staggered departure every 10 minutes.
If we get separated, rally point is the old mining station at grid reference 347 to 229.
It was going to be a difficult journey.
300 civilians, many of them children, moving across hostile terrain while Calathon forces hunted them. Marcus's squad would have to provide security, navigation, and leadership for a group that was far too large to move quickly or quietly.
But that was the mission.
Get the civilians to safety, no matter what it took. As his squad began organizing the evacuation, Marcus allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The hardest part was over. They'd neutralized the neural disruptor and secured the prisoners. Now all they had to do was cover 2 kilometers of open ground, avoid enemy patrols, and reach the extraction point before the fleet left without them. In other words, the easy part was just beginning. The evacuation had been proceeding smoothly for exactly 47 minutes when the Calathon reinforcements arrived. Marcus first noticed them as streaks of light in the pre-dawn sky, dropships descending from the orbital platforms with the kind of precision that spoke of superior technology and overwhelming force. He counted 12 vessels, each capable of carrying a full platoon of elite shock troopers. That meant roughly 500 fresh enemy soldiers would be on the ground within minutes, hunting for the humans who had dared to interfere with Empire operations.
"Contact, contact." Williams's voice crackled through the comm system. "Multiple enemy dropships, bearing 270.
They're heading straight for our position." Marcus looked back at the column of civilians stretching across nearly half a kilometer of broken terrain. Families with young children, elderly miners who had spent decades carving a life from this harsh world, people who had never asked to become pawns in an interstellar conflict. They were moving as fast as they could, but it wasn't nearly fast enough to outrun what was coming. "Rodriguez, get the civilians to cover," Marcus ordered.
"Anything that will stop energy weapons, rock formations, mining equipment, whatever you can find."
"Johnson, I need a defensive perimeter at grid reference 341 to 225.
"Martinez, you're with me."
It was a decision that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life, though not for the reasons he expected. Standard military doctrine called for the soldiers to withdraw with the civilians, maintaining maximum distance from enemy forces while moving toward the extraction point. It was the tactically sound choice, the one that would preserve the greatest number of lives. But Marcus looked at those families, at the terror in the children's eyes, at the parents desperately trying to carry belongings they couldn't bear to leave behind, and made a different choice.
"Wolfpack, listen up," he said into his helmet microphone. We're going to buy these people some time. I know the odds aren't good, but that's not new for us.
We hold them here, we give the civilians a chance to reach extraction.
There was a moment of silence on the tactical frequency.
Then, one by one, his soldiers confirmed their understanding.
No protests, no arguments about the impossibility of what he was asking them to do.
Just professional acknowledgement that this was the job, and they were going to do it. The first Calathan dropship touched down 300 meters from their position, its armored hull opening to disgorge a full platoon of shock troopers. Marcus watched through his rifle scope as the aliens deployed in textbook formation, energy shields interlocking to create a mobile fortress, heavy weapons taking covering positions, reconnaissance drones spreading out to map the surrounding terrain. It was beautiful to watch, in a terrifying way. The Calathan military was a precision instrument, each component working in perfect harmony with the others to create an unstoppable force. They had conquered dozens of star systems with tactics exactly like these, overwhelming their enemies through superior technology and flawless coordination. Marcus triggered his first shot when the lead Calathan trooper was 250 meters away. The projectile struck the alien's energy shield and dissipated harmlessly, but it served its purpose, announcing to the Empire forces that humans were present and prepared to fight. The response was immediate and devastating. Energy weapons lit up the dawn sky as dozens of Calathan soldiers opened fire simultaneously, their plasma bolts turning rock formations into glowing slag and filling the air with superheated particles. Marcus pressed himself against the ground as the barrage passed overhead, feeling the heat wash over his combat suit. But the aliens had made an assumption that would prove costly. They expected human resistance to collapse quickly under overwhelming firepower, the way it had in previous encounters with colonial defense forces. They were prepared for a brief firefight followed by surrender or retreat. They weren't prepared for humans who had no intention of retreating.
Williams, can you reach that ridge line at bearing 090? Marcus called over the roar of energy weapons. Already moving, Sergeant. Johnson, I need suppressing fire on the left flank.
Martinez, see if you can get close enough to use those explosives. The battle developed into a deadly game of cat and mouse across the broken landscape. The Calathan had superior firepower and numbers, but the humans had intimate knowledge of the terrain and the kind of desperate creativity that came from protecting something irreplaceable. Marcus's soldiers used every advantage they could find: ricochet shots around corners, improvised explosives in unexpected places, coordinated attacks that forced the aliens to divide their attention. For 30 minutes, 24 human soldiers held nearly 500 Calathan shock troopers in place, turning a simple mop-up operation into a grinding battle of attrition. It shouldn't have been possible, but Marcus had learned long ago that possibility was often less important than necessity when it came to protecting innocent lives. The turning point came when Private Williams managed to reach a high vantage point that overlooked the Calathan command post. His rifle spoke once, twice, 3 times, precision shots that found gaps in alien armor and dropped officers who were coordinating the attack. The Empire forces began to falter as their carefully planned assault devolved into confused firefights between individual units. Marcus seized the opportunity, leading a desperate charge that brought his squad within 50 meters of the enemy lines. It was insane by any tactical standard, but it worked. The Calathan fell back toward their dropships, their formation disrupted by humans who refused to follow conventional rules of engagement.
Sergeant, we've got a problem, Rodriguez's voice cut through the battle noise.
Long-range sensors are picking up a Calathan heavy cruiser in orbit. They're charging main batteries.
Marcus felt ice form in his stomach.
A heavy cruiser's main guns could sterilize the entire mining colony from orbit, turning the landscape into a field of radioactive glass. It was the kind of overwhelming response that the Empire used when local forces failed to achieve quick victory. If they couldn't have the system intact, they would ensure that no one else could use it either.
How long until they fire?
Marcus asked, still shooting at Calathan soldiers who were trying to re-establish their defensive positions.
15 minutes, maybe 20. The civilians are still 40 minutes from extraction.
The mathematics were simple and unforgiving. The orbital bombardment would begin long before the colonists could reach safety, and there was nothing that 24 human soldiers could do to stop weapons that operated from the vacuum of space. unless they gave the Calathan commander a reason not to use them. All squads, converge on the primary dropship, Marcus ordered, his voice calm despite the insanity of what he was about to attempt.
We're going to take some prisoners.
It was a plan born of desperation and the kind of tactical thinking that emerged when conventional options had been exhausted. If Marcus could capture senior Calathan officers, he might be able to negotiate a delay in the orbital strike, enough time for the civilians to reach extraction.
The assault on the dropship was brief and brutal.
Marcus led his soldiers in a frontal attack that relied on surprise and overwhelming aggression to break through alien defenses. The Calathan fought with professional skill, but they were unprepared for enemies who seemed willing to accept any casualties in pursuit of their objective. When the shooting stopped, Marcus found himself standing in the dropship's command center with 3 captured Calathan officers and the tactical communication array that connected them to the heavy cruiser in orbit. One of the aliens, a tall figure whose armor bore the insignia of high rank, regarded him with what might have been curiosity. "You fought well for an inferior species," the alien commander said, its words translated by the ship's computer system. "But this changes nothing. The colony will be destroyed to prevent future human interference with Empire operations." Marcus looked at the alien through his rifle's sights, then made a decision that would echo across the galaxy for years to come. Instead of threatening the prisoners or trying to negotiate for the civilians' lives, he simply activated the communication array and opened a channel to the orbiting cruiser. "This is Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun of the Human Colonial Defense Force," he said into the transmitter. "I have 3 of your officers in custody, and I'm prepared to execute them unless you delay your bombardment for 1 hour.
The response came back immediately. Human forces have no authority to negotiate with the Calathan Empire. Surrender immediately or face the consequences.
Marcus looked at the captured officers, then back at the communication array. "I'm not negotiating," he said quietly. "I'm informing you that if you fire on those civilians, I will kill your people. Not as part of a military strategy, not as a bargaining tactic. I will kill them because allowing the murder of innocent families is not acceptable, regardless of the consequences."
There was a long pause. When the alien voice returned, it carried a different tone, uncertainty, perhaps even concern. "You would sacrifice your own life for non-combatants who are not even members of your military unit?"
"That's the job," Marcus replied.
"That's what humans do." The orbital bombardment never came.
Instead, the Calathan heavy cruiser withdrew to the edge of the star system, its commander apparently unwilling to risk the execution of Empire officers for what was, ultimately, a minor strategic objective. The civilian evacuation proceeded without further interference, and 72 hours later, the Colonial Defense Fleet arrived to find an empty mining colony and no trace of either human or alien forces.
But the story didn't end there.
Within weeks, reports began circulating through Imperial intelligence networks about human soldiers who had held off vastly superior forces through sheer determination. Military analysts struggled to understand how a species with primitive technology had managed to defeat elite shock troopers in direct combat. More troubling were the reports from the captured officers, who described human soldiers willing to die for strangers, willing to sacrifice themselves for people they had never met and would never see again. It was a concept that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare and survival that had guided the Empire for centuries. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Calathan encountered an enemy that didn't fight to win, they fought because they didn't know how to quit. And, slowly, carefully, other species began to take notice of the small, primitive world where soldiers like Marcus Chun simply did their jobs, regardless of the odds against them. Marcus himself never learned about the broader implications of what he had done that day on Kepler 442c. He was too busy training for the next mission, preparing for the next time his squad would be called upon to do the impossible. Because that was the job, and Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun had never been anything other than a professional soldier who understood that sometimes the most important battles were won not through superior firepower or brilliant strategy, but through the simple refusal to abandon those who needed protection. The galaxy would never be quite the same.